Imagine scrolling through social media and seeing a family that looks so perfect it almost feels unreal. A smiling father standing proudly beside his wife. Two well-dressed children laughing in front of a spotless suburban home. Holiday photos filled with warmth. Birthday celebrations overflowing with love. And captions that speak about gratitude, faith, and togetherness. Only to wake up one morning and discover that behind those carefully filtered images, behind those polished smiles, and behind that peaceful front door, one of them had been living in silent terror for years. Imagine learning that the same home where neighbors gathered for barbecues, where children played safely in the yard, and where church friends held prayer meetings would one day become a crime scene soaked in blood, filled with unanswered questions, and surrounded by police tape as flashing lights illuminated secrets that had been buried for a very long time. And now imagine this. At 3:41 a.m., in that same beautiful home, a desperate phone call was made to emergency services, a call filled with trembling breaths, fragmented words, and a voice that sounded both terrified and strangely controlled, as if the person speaking already knew that everything was about to change forever. By sunrise, one member of that perfect family would be dead, and by nightfall, the entire nation would be asking the same haunting question: what really happened in that house? This is not simply a story about violence inside a home that once symbolized success and stability. This is a story about illusion, about how carefully constructed images can hide unbearable pain, about how silence can be more dangerous than screaming, and about how families that appear flawless on the outside can be quietly collapsing behind closed doors. When police first arrived at the Harper residence in Willow Creek, Colorado, they expected to find a tragic accident or a medical emergency. The neighborhood was known for its manicured lawns, its active parent-teacher associations, its community block parties, and its reputation as one of the safest places in the state to raise children. Violent crime was almost non-existent, and domestic incidents were rare enough to become gossip whenever they occurred. Yet that morning, officers walked into a nightmare. What they saw inside that house would trigger one of the most controversial investigations in recent American history, exposing failures in social systems, blind spots in community culture, and psychological patterns that many people still refuse to acknowledge. More disturbingly, the truth about what happened that night would be far more complicated than anyone initially believed. Before we step inside the story, if you value deeply researched, emotionally powerful crime narratives that go beyond headlines and expose the hidden realities of human behavior, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that deserve careful attention and honest storytelling. Now, let's go back to the beginning. To the outside world, the Harper family represented the American dream. Michael Harper was a successful financial consultant who worked with regional investment firms and frequently gave motivational talks about discipline, perseverance, and integrity. His wife, Rebecca Harper, was a former elementary school teacher who had chosen to stay home to raise their two children, Emily and Noah, creating a household that revolved around structure, education, and moral values. Their home sat at the corner of Maplewood Drive, a two-story colonial-style house with white shutters, flower-lined walkways, and a backyard that seemed designed for magazine covers. Every holiday, their decorations were admired. Every summer, their barbecues were packed. Every winter, their Christmas photos filled social media feeds. Neighbors often joked that the Harpers were too perfect to be real, never realizing how close that joke was to the truth. Inside the house, everything appeared orderly. Breakfast was served at the same time every morning. Homework was supervised every evening. Family prayers were held before bed. Arguments, if they happened at all, were never public. But perfection requires constant maintenance, and someone in that house was growing tired of maintaining it. Rebecca Harper was widely respected in Willow Creek. She volunteered at school events, organized charity drives, and served on the church's women's committee. She was known for her calm demeanor, her gentle voice, and her willingness to help anyone in need. What most people did not know was that Rebecca had been living with chronic anxiety for years. Behind her warm smile was a woman who constantly felt evaluated, measured, and judged, not only by her community, but by her own husband. Michael believed deeply in excellence and discipline, but his interpretation of those values often translated into control, criticism, and emotional pressure. He monitored household routines obsessively. He reviewed expenses in detail. He questioned parenting decisions. He commented on Rebecca's appearance, her social interactions, and her emotional reactions. None of it was overtly violent. None of it left bruises, but it slowly eroded her confidence. Psychologists later explained that this type of behavior fits the pattern of coercive control, a form of emotional abuse that operates through surveillance, manipulation, and subtle dominance rather than physical aggression. Victims often struggle to recognize it as abuse because it is disguised as concern, leadership, or wanting the best. Rebecca had convinced herself that this was simply marriage, that all couples struggled, that she was overreacting, that she needed to try harder. 6 months before the tragedy, small changes began to appear in Rebecca's behavior. She started canceling social engagements. She became quieter in group settings. She stopped volunteering as frequently. She began wearing long sleeves even in warm weather. At first, friends attributed it to stress or exhaustion. But one close friend, Laura Mitchell, later told investigators that Rebecca had once broken down in tears during a private conversation, confessing that she felt trapped in a life that looks perfect but feels empty and frightening. When Laura encouraged her to seek counseling or confide in family, Rebecca hesitated. She was afraid of ruining her children's stability. She was afraid of public judgment. And most of all, she was afraid of Michael's reaction. So she stayed silent. On the evening of April 22, 2025, the Harper family attended a charity dinner hosted by their church. Photos from that night show them smiling, laughing, and posing confidently, completely unaware that within hours, their lives would be shattered. After returning home around 10:30 p.m., neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Harper house for the first time in years. The argument lasted nearly 40 minutes before everything went quiet. At 3:41 a.m., Rebecca called 911. Her voice shook as she told the dispatcher that her husband was unresponsive, that there had been an accident, that she needed help. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. Michael Harper was pronounced dead at the scene, and nothing about the evidence made sense. Michael's body was found at the bottom of the staircase with severe head trauma. Rebecca claimed he had slipped, but investigators noticed something immediately. There were no skid marks, no broken handrail, no signs of a fall, and hidden in the bathroom trash can was a blood-stained towel. Before we uncover what that towel revealed and why police began to doubt Rebecca's story, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe this was a tragic accident, or do you think something far darker happened inside that house? When investigators returned to the Harper residence later that morning, long after the paramedics had removed Michael's body and the initial shock had begun to settle, they approached the scene with a growing sense of unease. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident now felt increasingly inconsistent with the physical evidence, and every step inside the home seemed to raise more questions than it answered. The staircase where Michael's body had been found showed no signs of disturbance. The wooden steps were intact, the railing was firmly secured, and the carpet at the base of the stairs bore no marks consistent with a violent tumble, creating an unsettling disconnect between Rebecca's account and the reality preserved within the walls of the house. Forensic specialists carefully documented the scene, measuring angles, photographing surfaces, and analyzing blood spatter patterns that suggested Michael had not fallen naturally from above. Instead, the distribution of blood indicated a concentrated impact, as though his head had struck a single hard surface rather than multiple steps. This observation alone was enough to shift the investigation from accident to potential homicide, but it was only the beginning of a series of discoveries that would dismantle the image of domestic harmony surrounding the Harper family. The blood-stained towel found in the bathroom trash can quickly become one of the most critical pieces of evidence. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Michael, and microscopic fiber traces indicated that it had been used to wipe a wound before emergency services were contacted. This discovery suggested that someone had attempted to clean up the scene before calling for help, a behavior that rarely aligns with genuine panic during an unexpected accident. When detectives questioned Rebecca about the towel, she initially claimed she had tried to stop the bleeding after finding Michael unconscious. However, medical examiners later testified that Michael's injuries were immediately fatal and that no amount of first aid could have saved him. This contradiction planted the first seeds of doubt in the minds of investigators, as it implied that Rebecca's actions were not driven by desperation to save her husband, but rather by an attempt to manage how the scene appeared to authorities. Psychologically, such behavior is often associated with individuals who experience sudden fear of consequences and instinctively attempt to regain control over a chaotic situation. Rather than reacting emotionally, they focus on minimizing perceived damage, sometimes without fully realizing how incriminating those actions appear. As detectives expanded their investigation, they began reviewing the Harper family's financial records, expecting to find nothing more than routine transactions. Instead, they uncovered a web of hidden debts, secret accounts, and unexplained withdrawals that painted a drastically different picture of Michael's professional success. Over the previous 2 years, Michael had accumulated more than $450,000 in personal debt through high-risk investments and unauthorized client fund transfers. Several of his accounts had been flagged internally by his firm, and he had been quietly placed under review for potential financial misconduct. If these irregularities had been exposed publicly, Michael would have lost his career, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. Even more troubling was the discovery that Rebecca had recently learned about these financial problems. Email records showed that she had confronted Michael just weeks before his death after finding legal notices hidden in his desk. In those messages, Rebecca expressed fear about losing their home and concern for their children's future, while Michael responded with anger, defensiveness, and vague assurances that he would fix everything. To investigators, this provided a potential motive: desperation. Further insight into the couple's deteriorating relationship came from their children's private therapy records, which were later released to authorities with court approval. In sessions conducted months before the incident, Emily had described frequent late-night arguments between her parents, often involving finances, control, and threats of separation. She recalled hearing her father accuse her mother of being ungrateful and weak, while her mother pleaded for honesty and transparency. On the night of April 22nd, neighbors confirmed hearing shouting, furniture moving, and what sounded like objects being thrown. One resident reported hearing Rebecca cry loudly, followed by Michael yelling that she was ruining everything. Digital evidence supported these accounts. Michael's phone contained a draft message to his financial advisor written at 11:18 p.m., expressing panic over an upcoming audit and admitting that everything is about to fall apart. Meanwhile, Rebecca had searched online for divorce attorney confidential consultation less than an hour later. This was not a peaceful household. It was a pressure cooker. As suspicion intensified, detectives conducted multiple interviews with Rebecca, each time probing deeper into her emotional state, her movements, and her recollection of events. Although she maintained that Michael had fallen accidentally, subtle inconsistencies emerged. She struggled to explain why she had waited nearly 20 minutes before calling 911. She could not account for bruising on her arms that appeared consistent with defensive contact, and she offered conflicting timelines regarding when she had gone to bed. Behavioral analysts observed that Rebecca displayed signs of extreme psychological fatigue rather than calculated deception. Her speech patterns suggested confusion, dissociation, and emotional overload, all common in individuals who have experienced prolonged coercive control. However, this did not absolve her of potential responsibility. It merely complicated the narrative. Was she a calculating killer, or a woman who had reached her breaking point? One of the most disturbing discoveries came when investigators examined the home's security system. Michael had installed cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, claiming they were for protection. However, data logs revealed that all recordings from the night of his death had been manually deleted at 2:57 a.m., less than an hour before the 911 call. The deletion required administrative access, which only Michael and Rebecca possessed. Michael was already dead, That left one possibility. When confronted, Rebecca claimed she had no knowledge of the deletion and suggested that Michael may have erased the footage earlier. But forensic timestamps proved otherwise. The files were removed after his estimated time of death. This revelation transformed the case from suspicious to alarming. Prosecutors began building a narrative in which Rebecca, overwhelmed by years of emotional control and newly discovered financial betrayal, confronted Michael during an argument that escalated into physical violence. According to this theory, Michael either fell or was pushed during the altercation, striking his head fatally at the base of the stairs. Realizing what had happened, Rebecca allegedly attempted to clean the scene, delete surveillance footage, and construct an accident narrative. This theory was supported by injury patterns, digital evidence, and behavioral analysis. However, it lacked one crucial element: direct proof of intent. Without a weapon, eyewitnesses, or a confession, the case remained circumstantial, and defense attorneys were preparing to exploit every gap. Just as prosecutors were finalizing their case, a new piece of evidence surfaced that threatened to dismantle their entire theory. A previously unknown audio file was recovered from Emily's tablet. It had been recorded accidentally during the argument, and it captured voices that suggested someone else may have been present in the house that night. Before we uncover what that recording revealed and how it changed everything, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Rebecca acted out of desperation, or is there another person who is yet to be held accountable? When forensic analysts finally managed to recover the corrupted audio file from Emily's tablet, the entire investigation shifted into a new and far more dangerous phase. The file, which had been accidentally recorded when Emily's device activated during a software update, captured nearly 42 minutes of fragmented sound from inside the Harper home on the night Michael died. Although parts of the recording were distorted by static and background noise, enough of the conversation remained intact to send shockwaves through everyone who listened to it. What began as muffled shouting gradually became clearer as technicians enhanced the audio. Michael's voice could be heard first, sharp and trembling with rage, accusing Rebecca of destroying his life and threatening that she would regret opening her mouth about his financial secrets. Rebecca's voice followed, strained and exhausted, pleading for honesty and begging him to stop lying to their children. For several minutes, the argument escalated in intensity, punctuated by sounds of objects hitting walls and furniture being dragged across the floor. Then, without warning, a third voice entered the recording. It was calm, controlled, and unfamiliar. The voice did not belong to Rebecca. It did not belong to Michael. And it did not match any known visitors listed in the family's records. It spoke briefly but decisively, telling Michael to sit down, warning him to stop losing control, and reminding him that this situation could ruin everyone. Investigators were stunned. Until that moment, the case had been framed entirely around a domestic dispute between husband and wife. The possibility that a third party had been present changed everything. It raised new questions about motive, opportunity, and manipulation. More importantly, it suggested that Michael's death may not have been the result of a private marital conflict, but rather the culmination of a much larger and more dangerous secret. Voice comparison experts were brought in, and after days of analysis, they identified a probable match. The voice belonged to Daniel Crawford, Michael's longtime business partner. Daniel Crawford had always appeared to be a peripheral figure in the investigation, mentioned only briefly in financial documents and business emails. He was described as professional, reliable, and deeply trusted by Michael. However, when detectives began scrutinizing his background, they uncovered a series of disturbing connections that had gone unnoticed. For years, Daniel and Michael had been involved in unauthorized investment schemes that funneled client money into offshore accounts. While Michael handled the public-facing side of their operation, Daniel managed the hidden financial infrastructure. If exposed, both men faced federal charges and decades in prison. Phone records revealed that Daniel had visited the Harper home several times late at night in the months before Michael's death. On April 22nd, he had arrived at 10:47 p.m., just minutes before the argument began. Security cameras should have captured his presence, but those recordings were the very files that had been deleted. Suddenly, the missing footage made sense. Using the audio recording, phone data, and forensic evidence, investigators reconstructed the final hours of Michael's life with chilling precision. According to this timeline, Daniel had arrived to confront Michael about the impending audit and the growing risk of exposure. Rebecca, already emotionally overwhelmed, became involved when she discovered the extent of the deception. What began as a financial crisis meeting spiraled into a volatile confrontation. Michael, realizing that both his wife and his partner knew the truth, panicked. He became aggressive, both verbally and physically. Witnesses on the audio could hear Rebecca sobbing as Michael accused her of betrayal, while Daniel attempted to mediate, urging both of them to calm down. At approximately 1:36 a.m., the argument reached its peak. A loud crash echoed through the recording, followed by silence, then frantic breathing, then Rebecca screaming Michael's name. After the fatal impact, panic overtook reason. Investigators believe that Michael either stumbled or was pushed during a physical struggle and struck his head against the base of a staircase. Whether the push was intentional, accidental, or the result of chaotic movement remains disputed, but what followed was undeniably calculated. Daniel, facing financial ruin and imprisonment, allegedly took control of the situation. He instructed Rebecca not to call emergency services immediately, insisting that they needed to think first. He deleted the surveillance footage, wiped fingerprints from key surfaces, and coached Rebecca on how to describe the incident as an accident. Text messages recovered later revealed Daniel sending Rebecca detailed instructions in the early morning hours, advising her what to say and warning her that everything depends on staying consistent. Rebecca, emotionally shattered and terrified of losing her children, complied, not because she was guilty of murder, but because she was trapped. When the case finally went to trial, it became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in the country. Prosecutors initially focused on Rebecca, portraying her as a woman driven to violence by resentment and financial fear. However, the defense introduced the audio recording, financial records, and expert testimony that reframed her as a victim of manipulation and coercion. Daniel was subsequently charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and financial fraud, and later with involuntary manslaughter based on his role in the events leading to Michael's death. Prosecutors argued that his actions created the conditions that resulted in fatal violence, and that his cover-up demonstrated consciousness of guilt. Over 6 weeks of testimony, jurors listened to emotional accounts from Emily and Joshua, forensic experts, psychologists, and digital analysts. They watched as Rebecca broke down on the stand, describing years of emotional control, isolation, and fear. They also heard Daniel deny responsibility, claiming he had only tried to help his friend. But the evidence told another story. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury reached its decision. Rebecca Harper was acquitted of all homicide charges. The court ruled that there was insufficient evidence to prove intent or criminal negligence on her part and acknowledged the psychological coercion she had endured. Daniel Crawford was convicted on multiple counts, including obstruction of justice, conspiracy, financial crimes, and involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. For the Harper children, the verdict brought closure without comfort. Their father was gone, their family was shattered, and their childhood had been permanently rewritten. In the years that followed, psychologists and criminologists studied the Harper case as a powerful example of how hidden financial corruption, emotional control, and fear can transform ordinary households into environments of extreme danger. It demonstrated how violence is rarely spontaneous, but often the final eruption of long-suppressed conflict. Michael had built a perfect image on a foundation of lies. Daniel had protected that image for personal gain. Rebecca had survived inside it, and their children had paid the ultimate emotional price. The tragedy was not just that a man died. It was that the warning signs had been visible for years, and no one had seen them. Even today, experts continue to debate one question: did Michael fall, or was he pushed? And will the full truth ever truly be known? Before you leave, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe justice was truly served, or do you think there are still unanswered questions hidden beneath this story? Thank you for watching, and stay with us for more powerful stories that reveal what lies behind perfect appearances.